Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Quods Get Gold. And as you know, we're doing this for the benefit of all of us and the Gold Institute for International Strategy. And we're going to be putting a link from time to time so that you can make a donation, a tax-deductible donation to the Institute if you feel like it. Today, we had a most interesting woman, but you're gonna make up your own minds in a little while. Olfa Hamdi is the founder and leader of the Third Republic Party of Tunisia, and a former CEO and Chairwoman of the Tunisian National Airline Tunisair. She's an engineer, an entrepreneur, an FIT auditor of industrial projects, and the inventor of the advanced work packaging method for delivering complex projects, and that is being adopted around the world. She is the founder and CEO of Concord Project Technologies, a California company specializing in supporting owner, energy, and mining companies. Hamdi was born in Gafsa, Tunisia, completed her early studies there, and now she holds a Master in Science and Capital Project Management from the University of Texas, Austin, a Master of Science in Engineering from the Ecole Centrale de Lille, and a graduate degree in Alternative Dispute Resolution for Construction Disputes from the Texas School of Law. She is also a Fellow of the State Bar of Texas Construction Law Section, and a prolific writer and speaker in English, French, and Arabic. Olfa is passionate about unlocking Tunisia's economic growth and advancing US-Tunisia ties as the founder and president of the Center for Strategic Studies on Tunisia, an independent research and advocacy organization. In 2011, reached the release announcing her candidacy for the presidency of Tunisia, the Tunisian people proved themselves to be a free people who, by rising up for their rights, rejected autocracy in all its forms and established their inherent right to choice. It is in accord with this freedom of choice that she accepted the nomination of the National Council of the Third Republic Party to run in the upcoming presidential election of Tunisia. And without further ado, and as we always do here, that you may form your own opinions, I give you Olfa Hamdi. Good evening, Olfa.
Hello.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Well,
Thank you for the invitation and for the really great introduction and bio. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, you know that it took only a little bit of research. You're a better known woman than many would assume, and hopefully a little bit more after today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on your platform. I appreciate what you're doing, and I hope we can, through this conversation, as you mentioned it, we can learn together, but also benefit everybody listening. So thank you.
Yes, and I'll have to let the cat out of the bag. I'm particularly interested in learning myself, and everything else follows from that. If I don't learn, nobody does. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Of course, we did have a brief conversation beforehand, but so that people know, we have no script. We have no a menu of things to choose from. We're going to have a free-flowing conversation more than an interview, so that rather than answer my queries, please feel free to talk about whatever interests you, whatever you want to say.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the...
Now, you're most welcome. Thank you for being here. Now, you have an impressive resume. You have an impressive resume and an impressive history already, and you are only, what, 35 years of age?
36 already.
36. I'm already taking a year off. Uh, but yeah, frankly, you don't look a day older than 35.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you. Thank you.
uh,
You're a gentleman. That's the closest way to get into a woman's heart.
oh, well, I've been accused of worse. Now, when I look at your resume and I look that you have accumulated degrees in engineering,
Yes.
which is probably not the most common career option for Tunisian women, is it?
Actually, it is quite common.
Tell me about that. Tell us about that, because I don't think people know how European Tunisia can be.
Yeah, well, Tunisia is modern day Carthage. For those who recognize Carthage from the Punic Wars and and from the great leader Hannibal, who fought, of course, the war against the Roman Empire. And for us, we consider him as the last freedom fighter of the ancient world. So we're the descendants of Hannibal, of Carthage. And so there is already a lot of history that is very ancient come in Tunisia. And so I would say Tunisian women are as complex and as sophisticated as our history. And so, yes, we have a pretty good, actually, public education system, which mandated education to girls since the 50s, since the Tunisian state was founded as an independent state after having been colonized by France. Then we got our independence, and then we started the whole journey of into the human capital. Product of that, long-term legacy investments into that. If you look at North Africa, you have Tunisia, you have Algeria, Libya, which are our neighbors, our two neighbors, and then of course on the European side, Italy, France, and everybody else. But immediately after 1956, after the independence, as a reaction to having been colonized, most countries in North Africa started what's called a race to being armed. So everybody started buying arms, investing so much into defense, investing so much into putting a lot of their budget into military capabilities. Tunisia was an outlier in the entire Arab world and all of North Africa in that regard. Since 1956, there was a strategic decision that was made, which is saying we're not going to live with the trauma of having been colonized. We're going to we'll create a really solid, effective, efficient military, but we will put most of our budget into healthcare and education, and we will mandate healthcare education to all girls. And so in Tunisia, it's illegal to not put your girl at school, starting the age of 5 or 6. And that created a whole journey, actually, for also women emancipation. Tunisia is the only and first Arab country to have banned polygamy, for example, to have actually supported women access to the job market. And so since 1956, all of that progress, I'm just a product of that, right? And a lot of other women before me have done so, have contributed to not just the social economic progress of women, but also the political progress of women.
Indeed, indeed. But that wasn't what I meant. What I meant is engineering.
All right.
It is generally
Mhm.
a field where most women don't go into, and those who do,
Yes.
of course, excel.
Yes.
Their motivation is overpowering, and you seem to have done that at a very early age.
Well, I will give the credit to my father for that. So if that's the answer you're looking
That's as good an answer as any. Your father then, was he an engineer by any chance?
My father is an engineer. He was an engineer, and he holds a PhD in computer science and agriculture. And so in the 80s, and so it was pretty unique. And so, as an engineer who's a doctorate, he raised us with a very strict code at home. Is you succeed at school, he's happy. You don't, he's unhappy.
Mm.
So I was also inspired by him. He was also he had leadership roles and positions, senior positions at the olive oil office, which is used to be a public
Yes.
state-owned enterprise, and Tunisia is one of the top.
One of the top. Zaytun is one of my favorite olive oils.
Yes, it's one of the top world producers of olive oil and the world
Yes.
top producer of organic olive oil. And so
Yes.
I grew up when I was.
And just so that people know, Tunisia has been producing olive oil since Roman times.
Since Roman times, we have some olive trees that are 3,000-year-old olive trees.
Yes.
Visit, I'll take you there.
But by the way, how amazing do they look? These humongous olive trees with all kinds of convoluted branches forming the trunk. They're a beautiful sight to see, indeed.
Well, speaking of olive trees, the olive tree is the symbol of my party. So it's the symbol we chose for the party. Well, so I grew up in that environment where I've seen my father serve as a public servant, of course, as an engineer, as an administrator into the Tunisian administration. I've seen him work very hard, take life very seriously. And as an engineer, he influenced me, of course, to become one. And so that, I would say, that was one of the reasons. Another reason might be, now that I'm thinking about this, so my hometown is Gafsa, and Gafsa is the mining region in Tunisia. And it's one of the top world phosphate producers, actually, in the world as a town. And when I was young, he used to take me to see the phosphate production sites and the mines. And so I actually liked that. And that may be what also led me to go to the construction field and the industrial construction field. I was impacted by that. So yeah.
That's fascinating.
And it turned out to be a politician. Well, it helps.
Do you find that your training as an engineer, I should say from an earlier age than most, given your family background, has shaped your rational thinking, your critical thinking, your ability to identify problems that need to be solved, whether you're talking about distribution of production in a particular environment or in society?
It's a very good question. I think it contributed, among other things, but it's definitely a big driver. I think what engineering has helped me do is when I have to deal with political problems and social problems and policy problems, I always have a distance from that very same problem. So I have that, I would call it a safe distance, where I have to look at it rationally, even though it's impacting me personally, right? And so that ability, that skill to be able to, yes, have an emotional response to that issue that is driving you, that's maybe hurting your people or hurting you, but in the middle of that, I can still, distill the rational approach and the rational conclusion and an outcome to it. And so I agree with your assessment, right?
Yep, no, I just wanted to see how engineering informed your politics.
Yes.
And it's always been my impression that it helps to rationalize, to do a critical analysis of what's in front of you.
Yeah, we have examples. I mean, Angela Merkel, she was, she's a scientist, and then she did a pretty good job being the leader of Germany for quite some time. I mean, one might argue with her policies, but in general, she had the trust of the German people to lead the country in difficult times. And so I think Margaret Thatcher also was a scientist or an engineer. So I think maybe, it's not that uncommon with female engineers to end up in politics if we want to take a look back at history.
Yep. Well, I'll have to give it to you. I'll have to concede that point because the more I think about it, barring a few a few examples called Ameir. Yes, it tends to, they tend to go together. Now, in order to understand why you are running for president of Tunisia today, I'm not entirely sure that you can campaign in Tunis now.
We're working on it.
Yes, but we're going to get to that in a second. I remember Tunisia as a very, or rather, I remember Tunis. That's as far as I went.
All right.
As a very European city. You could have been anywhere in France and not know that you've been transported there. It was very open to tourism. Their hospitality was amazing, and their couscous is something to write home about.
Thank you.
And everything was beautiful until. And that is until it fell under the grasp of, this would be in the 70s. I don't think they ever made it back from hosting the PLO in Tunis. That's where, whether it's right or not, that's where my recollection takes me. From this moment on, things were not the same. And you guys ended up with a dictator, Ben Ali, that was perhaps, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but perhaps one of the worst things that could have happened to a society like Tunisian society. And that eventually led to the uprising in 2011, a popular uprising, the first one in what was later to be called the Arab Spring. And there were great hopes for democracy. People in Tunisia had an affinity for democratic government.
Yes.
But what I see now is a few steps backward, a sliding back into authoritarianism. When was it? 4 or 5 years ago, a man with no political history, a professor, was elected without even campaigning. And about a year ago, he staged a self-coup, dissolved the parliament, and in a parliamentary system, he's now the president with almost la summa del poder público, almost the entire political power in his hands. Now he's calling for elections. Now, one of his opponents is in jail. You are not in the country. How is this? Can Tunisia come out of this hole?
I always believe Tunisia can come out of this and more, actually, because Tunisia
otherwise you wouldn't be running, but I want to hear how.
So on some of what, thank you for sharing that overview. We generally, you basically try to summarize maybe 40 years of history in 2 minutes. So great job doing that. So Tunisia is really about Tunisians. So Tunisians make Tunisia, right? And I know Tunisians. I'm one of them. They're members of my party. They're members in my coalition. They belong to other parties. They're in the opposition. They're in the streets and the markets, at school, at home, abroad. There are 2 million Tunisians abroad. And I encounter them and I speak to them. And the level of resilience Tunisians have when facing adversity it actually amazes me and inspires me as a politician. And so actually one of the more I get in touch with the people, that's where I get of course, after God, but that's where I get most of my energy to keep going, no matter what happens. And so I would like to share that with the resilience of the Tunisian people. And over the past, I would say 13 years, since 2011, Tunisians have literally experienced in power at the executive branch anyway, or the executive leadership. They've had three totally different political ideologies or groups lead the country. They tried the Islamists or political Islam or the Muslim Brotherhood in power for about 4 or 5 years. They got voted out of power. Then they tried the Destour, which is the old regime establishment, for 5 more years. And then they tried the extreme left or the communists, Baathists, Pan-Arabists with Said, the current president, which his term just ended, by the way. So we're waiting for the election calendar to start.
Yes, he's actually overstaying his term right now.
Yeah, he's now technically every single day where no calendar is announced, he's overstaying his term. And so in less than 15 years, Tunisians have tried three political leadership of three totally different families ideologically at the executive branch. And each time, each one of those families or political groups went radical. Each time one of these groups went radical while in power, they got voted out by Tunisians or taken out from power by Tunisians. I want to emphasize that so much because that tells you who the Tunisian people are. They're the type of people who are on the side of peace. They're on the side, it's a touristic country because the people are welcoming. They're on the side of education. They believe in educating their kids. They believe in good relations in their neighborhood. They believe in they're private. Actually, they're pretty much they're free people. So they believe in property ownership, property rights. They believe in their freedom, their economic freedom. I mean, when you think of 2011, what ignited the entire uprising was the fruit cart seller, Mohamed Bouazizi, who burned himself because the police took away his cart.
Yes.
That's the biggest act of protest for the government taking away his property and his tool of creating
his livelihood.
His livelihood. And so that tells you that the root cause of the uprising in Tunisia and this whole revolution, which was driven by this slogan, which says "Shoghl, Hurriya, Karama, Wataniya." That was the slogan of the revolution, which is employment, freedom, dignity. Employment, freedom, dignity. It's a very equation, right? And so when I observe the Tunisian people and their political story and their interaction with political leadership throughout the past 13 years, 14 years, it's quite clear that Tunisians are still coherent into what they actually are aspiring for, which is employment, jobs, freedom, and dignity. And so that's why I know it's hard, it's costly, it's quite disturbing in a way to say that we've gone through a democratic transition and then for some reason now we might actually be seeing the entire democratic process fall apart. It sounds risky and it sounds scary, but I have this really deep faith that, as you said it, very well said it, Tunisians are overwhelmingly on the side of democracy. And so what they like in the leader, they like strength, but that's not autocratic strength though. So they like leadership, which everybody likes leadership, even the American people do. But what's happening is this bait and switch strategy, where Said, he was given this trust of the people in 2019 so that he could reform and fight corruption.
Yes.
Problem.
But by the way, is Said's movement the Popular Front?
Well, technically, he's calling himself an independent with no movement, so he doesn't have a movement. That's what he's saying, and I think that's turning against him again because he doesn't believe in intermediary bodies. It's the communist thinking where.
Right.
Yeah, the leader.
Right. He wants the no party. Didn't he have an idea of creating the Soviets of Tunisia, like little regional councils
Yeah,
elected by the people, who would in turn elect the representatives to the National Assembly, who would in turn elect the government.
yeah.
Eh,
So
what he was describing there is the Soviet.
yeah, it's exactly. He's a communist. I mean, what do you want me to? How can I label? He's a communist. And when
No,
people voted for him in 2019, they didn't vote for him as a communist. No, I mean they voted for him. It was like a sanctioned vote. Actually, you said something. You said he didn't campaign and was elected. Actually, that's not true. He campaigned for 5 years before being elected, and his
he
campaign.
did. Okay.
Oh yeah, he campaigned. Of course, he campaigned on his merits being a law professor. He campaigned on promising to reform the governance system, end corruption and things like that. So it's actually he did campaign. There's no
Actually, he did campaign.
yeah, no
It's a
merit.
no campaign campaign.
Yeah,
I'm not campaigning, but I'm here.
but these kind of leaders that want to create a holy feature to them, they try to make their ascension to power miraculous, and they're
Miracles. They're above politics.
above politics. But no, he did campaign, he went through the people, he did the tour of the country like I did. It's the same old political strategy that every politician has to do. And actually he's going to lose this election because he's not campaigning anymore, because he thinks he's above the people and he has to sit in his comfortable seat and the presidential palace, make speeches, put people in jail, and he doesn't need to campaign anymore. And I think Tunisians are going to really give him a really good lesson so that he can remember that it's the people who put anybody
Yeah.
in the seat, and it's not called governing; it's actually called public service. And in Arabic, actually, in Tunisia, we need to distinguish that term, because hukum, which is governing, is like a top-down approach. Public service is more like upper,
Yes.
up approach. And so we're getting into that point where we're changing that. And so I would say my thinking is that for this election, and it's not just me, actually, many people, but I think the international scene is gonna heavily cover what's gonna happen in this presidential election, because he's gonna get a lesson, a really good one, like every other communist in the country who think they can shortcut the Tunisian people. And for some reason, those who actually rose against dictatorship in 2011, they're gonna, for somehow now they're okay getting back to a slave or a subject status. Absolutely not. Tunisians
No,
are.
and they're still very much around.
I'm sorry.
And those, the ones who rose against Ben Ali
Yeah,
in 2011, are still very much around. They
yeah.
haven't gone anyplace.
I always say, like, think about it. I was in my 20s when that happened. Most of the martyrs who died fighting against the regime in 2011 are young people of my age.
Yes.
So we are still here. I mean, that freedom is alive in us. We can't just go back to being unfree, right? As Tunisians, we're done with that. Plus, since 2011 to today, there is a whole new generation of youth that got to maturity and now are voters. In this year's election, we have two more young voters who are the first time voting in this election, and they have never voted before. So they were in teenagehood over the past decade, and now they're voting. And so the population changed. I mean, now 51% of the voter base is below the age of 39. So,
Now, there is another thing that I noticed,
yeah.
because by the way, I love your optimism and your outlook, and I think you're right.
It's the
I don't think these people are going to be put back in a bottle without a fight.
No, and it's the optimism and persistence, and also scientific political analysis of their actual popularity, which is very low. Because some people say, well, he's popular and he's supported. I'm like, show me the evidence. There is none. As an incumbent, he's at 20%. Obviously, the majority of the population is against him. It's a popular vote. Of course, he can't win. And so that optimism and that logical, rational analysis of the voter base and of the situation of where we are, plus his policies and his record, which is totally poor on the economy and on other fronts, is actually what is the antidote to the fear that he's trying to instill. Putting candidates in jail, enacted an executive order. It's called Executive Order 54, where you can be put in jail for saying something on a YouTube channel like this.
Yep.
Putting journalists in jail. 41 journalists are in jail because he put them in jail. Not just politics.
Right, because he's virtually assumed all powers unto himself.
And so what he's trying to do, he's trying to instill the fear. And so the antidote to the fear is the truth. And it's the alternative. And it's sticking to what we know should happen. And what we know should happen is a presidential election exactly in the same conditions that got him to power in 2019.
Right.
In that democratic environment and window of the presidential election, I can bet everything on him losing.
How do you bet on yourself?
Good one. That's a good question. Well, I bet my entire life on this thing, right? So I'm all in, Sol. I'm all in.
You must have a little bit of faith.
I don't have a plan B, Sol. I don't have a foot in, a foot out. I'm all in. Actually, he tried last Friday at 1 a.m. in the morning. He tried to change the age limit of the presidential election for the candidacy. And he's trying to change the age limit, and I'll be the only one eliminated if he does, right? But yeah, from 35, the electoral law says 35 years old, you can run for president. And he's trying to change it to 40 years old. Anyway, so I actually published a video and I said, let me tell you something. If you think you're going to exhaust us all as a population and people are just going to give up and accept that you're the new emperor or dictator, or whatever you want to call yourself, I said, hey, you're actually going against biology. I told him, I'm 36. I can stay until the age of 70 fighting you on this. I can outlast you and write history about you, with all due respect. And so you're going against biology. You should respect the Tunisian people more. Tunisians are not your classmates when you were at university having a debate about which governance system or whether communism should have been the right thing, or whether Pan-Arabism or whether Nasser should have won the war and should have, or whether the oil embargo should have succeeded. These are debates you had with your classmates at the university. Maybe you won against them, but my generation, you can't win against my generation. And actually, even our parents are supporting us now, because Tunisian parents, they are saddened and their hearts are bleeding because their kids are leaving. There's a sort of a mass exodus that's happening right now. Tunisians are really smart. They realized, okay, GDP growth, we're averaging 0.3%. This guy enacting communist policies, he's expropriating properties, he's putting business people in jail, he just broke the integrity of the central bank, the currency is going down, he's following, the classic model of sinking the economy, the black market is growing in Tunisia. He's turning and creating some alliances which are unnatural to Tunisia's geography and Tunisians people. He's creating an alliance with Iran, a country that is at war, where the per capita income is exactly like Tunisia. So they're not even better, than us in terms of their economic situation to help us. So his entire approach and strategy is clearly going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, so, I would say that it's not just a matter of GDP, but consider how Iran has helped its allies in Lebanon, Syria, Yemen. Yes. Wherever they go, chaos ensues.
Yes.
Now, the Ba'ath Party, is it similar to the Ba'ath in Syria or Iraq?
Yes, I mean, in Tunisia, we still have all of these parties. Think of Tunisia, it's 12 million population, but its political scene, because it's at the intersection of the East and the West. I can bet you anything. Pick any political ideology, even one from...
There's what there?
You will find it in Tunisia.
Yes.
It's a rich country from a political ideology. It's like the library of political ideology. You can meet people from Baathism, communism, Islamism, center-right, which my party is, liberalism, nationalism, and all of the gray areas in between, socialists. I mean, it's a very political town. And so, yeah,
That would make for very lively parliament meetings.
yes, well, it made for a very turbulent parliament.
Yes,
Yes,
that's what I meant. It's,
actually, the turbulence in parliament, which was a reflection of the Tunisian society, Tunisians didn't like how much polarizing the conflict was and how violent it got, actually, at some point. And so Said used that unhappiness of Tunisians with the turmoil in the political scene to justify, canceling, this.
yes. You give up your freedom, we'll give you some peace.
We'll give you some peace. A great point.
Yes.
And it's
You know what real Americans think about that Faustian choice.
no. What do you mean? Sorry.
Well, Benjamin Franklin's famous, those who are willing to give up freedom in exchange for security deserve neither.
Oh, I like that. I like that. And actually, by the way, from a foreign policy point of view, his foreign policy relationship with Europe is based on that assumption, which is a false assumption, which is somehow democracy and security are a zero-sum game. So if
Yes.
we have a democracy in Tunisia, it's a security threat. So therefore, we have to go for an autocratic system, which is the most stable form. But
Right.
it's actually the entire region that
And some Europeans
Mhm.
who are of like mind
Mhm.
have just given him €1 billion
Mhm.
to stem the flow of migrants through Tunisia.
Yes. So
Uh,
yeah. So the deal is based on him keeping migrants away, and then in exchange for that, they're basically silent about democracy,
whatever he does.
right? And I'm, and of course I'm not generalizing. I'm not saying all of Europe is like that. Europe is as diverse.
No. But the people who put this deal together, let's be
Primarily,
honest.
Italy with Prime Minister Meloni, she's the mastermind of this entire equation. But when I look at it from and which is, by the way, surprising, because for a center-right leader and a conservative leader to actually make a deal with a communist for migration reasons, sometimes I wonder, like, which is more important in a way, and why is it that for some reason we cannot trust that center-right leaders or democratic leaders are also pro-security and because reducing the flow of migration and having a secure and safe Mediterranean is not just because we want to keep away migrants from Europe. It's for our own kids and our own families. I don't want Tunisian young men and women to die at sea because they're trying to cross to Europe to achieve and live their economic dream. So strong border security is something I believe in because it's actually good. It saves
Because it's good for Tunisia.
It's good for Tunisia independently. And so it's quite honestly, it's a little bit sad. But when I look at it from a historic point of view, look, I think historically Europe has had a sort of a pattern, or I would say the template to the relationship template between the north of the Mediterranean and the south of the Mediterranean is based on a relationship that is government to government transaction, autocracy on the south, democracy on the north, and we figure out a relationship. With Tunisia going through a democratic transition, that has also, in a democracy, sometimes you have these voices that come out to express a part of the population which has been frustrated with the relationship with Europe. It's rightfully so. And so that democracy somehow created an anxiety or an anxious relationship between the south of the Mediterranean and the north of the Mediterranean, which is part of the democratic transition. I just honestly, I think it's a missed opportunity for Europe right now to not stand with democracy, to not stand with the Tunisian people who are on the side of the democracy. And their bet on Said is the wrong bet. It's gonna backfire. It's gonna actually make them lose the moral high ground on democracy values. And it's unfortunate, honestly. But maybe, I don't know, maybe things will change soon after the parliamentary election in Europe. Maybe things will change now. I don't know. I'm always hoping.
Maybe. Uh, yeah, I do think that, with Tunisia having a little bit of backsliding in its democratic development, plying with money a government that is quite xenophobic to begin with, because nobody's talking about that. They are helping Tunisia guard its borders, but they are also helping Said stay in power.
It's
And that cannot be a good formula. It never is.
had he been, let's say, a popular leader and also a legitimate leader, because look, legitimacy has to be renewed, and legality of being commander-in-chief and leader of the country has to be renewed every 5 years. Tunisia is a country where the rule of law has actually been quite advanced compared to other North African countries. So when we see European countries authorize, for example, loans to a government or cabinet members who are technically, per Tunisian law, illegal, since they overstayed their term and they're
Right.
mandating them, which is actually against the Vienna Convention, because the Vienna Convention is very clear about the importance of the representation, the legitimate and legal representation of people to their of
Right.
leaders. And so when you see, for example, European institutions break their own compliance with European laws and international laws, then, also for somebody like me, for example, sometimes I wonder, it's like, that's a very dangerous road to go into, because if you cannot uphold your own international laws, which were enacted in your own capitals, then you lose also the rule of law, the high ground on the importance of the rule of law and upholding the rule of law internationally. And so we start with these small decisions here and there, including the case of Tunisia, which is, I think, is strategic to the overall democratic battle all over the world. I think the case of Tunisia will be watched as, if Western countries and democratic free world countries normalize with the absence of the rule of law, with the assassination of the rule of law in Tunisia, and they break their own compliance and their own ethical and legal standards per EU Commission, per EU laws and international laws, for the sake of whatever reason it is, right? Which does not make sense, because, as I mentioned, democracy also delivers security. And every single leader who has been elected in Tunisia, no matter their affiliation, they actually stood there. Tunisia delivered on its side on the security piece, whether it's on the energy to Europe or the migration. We have always.
I was going to go. The energy thing is
Always.
where they may be overplaying their hand most.
Yes.
There are agreements in place for Tunisia to supply gas, oil, and electricity.
Yes.
A sizable portion of Europe's energy needs.
Yes.
Aren't these policies of throwing a helping hand to the wannabe dictator ultimately in detriment of Europe's policies? Would a reaction from Tunisia actually put that at risk?
So I don't see. So I always understand. So energy and security have to always keep, for me, the way I see it, right? As a politician, I believe they have to always keep going, no matter who's the leader is. And Tunisia and the Tunisian state has always, honestly, was on the right side of these issues, no matter what. Now, here's the risk, though. The risk is not helping him. No, that's not the risk. The risk is him expropriating these very same assets and these very same investments into Tunisia, nationalizing them, the same way happened in Venezuela and in others. That's the risk. And that's what I say. I say it's not about helping him. No, I mean, Tunisia is way more complex. Then when president, by the way. I mean, it's the state, the institutions, the ministries, the administration. We have a long legacy of being a country of institutions. It's not helping him. But when you actually invest in energy projects, pipelines, and by doing so, you're not upholding your other side of the bargain, which is rule of law, international rule of law. Do not use your power to break Tunisia's rule of law and institutions. Then you're on the risk of him expropriating and nationalizing everything. As a matter of fact, he already publicly spoke to the National Security Council about nationalizing energy sites. He already, actually, his supporters go on the radio and on TV calling for him to nationalize oil sites and energy sites on pipelines. And so the nationalization is
I wonder why a communist would have such an idea.
Oh, exactly. It's like, guys, as a communist, he's going there. That he fantasizes about that because he still is living under the dream of what Nasser did and others did and Gaddafi did and others.
Yeah. May I suggest a thing, because the love of Nasser and the association with the Ba'ath Party suggests to me more of a fascist than a communist collectivism.
Yeah.
Not that in practical terms it would be much different.
Yes.
But it seems he seems to surround himself with the idea of fascists.
Well, he's a radical man. What do you want me to say? And bad for the economy. And now Tunisians know that because the currency has devaluated. He has already broke the integrity of the central bank. He was unable to finance the budget internationally.
Yep. The International Monetary Fund went like this to him.
He picked a fight with the IMF coming out of nowhere, which by now I believe it's part of his plan, actually sinking the economy and bringing it to its knees and devaluating the economy and Tunisians' assets, right?
Because that would give them the justification for nationalization.
Exactly.
Because it's always the banks and industry that are causing all of our ills. And the Jews. Has he gone anti-Semitic yet?
Well, in a certain way, yes. I mean,
because it's always part of the formula.
It's always part of the formula, and I confirmed that, actually. Well, it's unfortunate. I mean, so Tunisia, actually, we have a really a vibrant, very patriotic Tunisian Jews who are a Jewish community who love Tunisia, and I know many of them, and some of them are in my party, and their love of Tunisia is undescribable, honestly. And Tunisia, actually, in the island of Jerba, is home to one of the most holiest sites for the Jewish community all over the world, actually, where Jews come to do pilgrimage in Jerba. And Tunisia historically actually has been the land of interfaith tolerance and dialogue. Saint Augustine, Saint Augustine is Tunisian, actually. He was born in Tunisia. He, wrote most of his writings while he was in Tunisia. And so Tunisia has this, it's this multi-lingual, multicultural, multi-religious, beautiful country. And that's the DNA of the people. And that's what it's supposed to be. So any project that is not in line with that, any project that's based on hate or fear or animosity or a zero-sum game view of the world. If I want to be friends with China, I have to pick a fight with the US. That's the thinking, right? If I want to be friends with Italy, I have to pick a fight with France. That kind of thinking, which is totally immature in my view, and unbeneficial and hurtful to the Tunisian people interests. So that any policy that goes against the real nature of what Tunisia is doesn't succeed and can't last and gets rejected by the population. And I think that's why, the same way he got a huge spike in his popularity a few years ago, he's going down as fast as he went up. And I call him a circumstantial leader. And that's why I am on the side of those who believe, look, a lot of people say 2021, he did what some called a self-coup, all right?
Yep.
Most countries don't recover from that, at least for a decade or more, right? Well, Tunisia actually will make the exception. I think within 2 years, he's going to be out of, right now, by the end of this year, he's out of the office. I believe that. All we need is a presidential election in the same conditions of 2019, no meddling.
Now, let's assume for a second, because we don't have that much long left,
Right.
although I'm more than game to have you around again. I am learning a lot today. How would Tunisia be under a Hamdi presidency? Where would you like Tunisia to go? I see Tunisia as a little bit more, although including, but a little bit more than olive oil, a vacation spot for Europeans, and energy.
Yes.
That is a given.
Yes.
But there is a lot more potential in there. Where do you see Tunisia going under the right leadership?
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that question. So my vision for Tunisia is for Tunisia to be the safe harbor of North Africa. So that is the first element of Tunisia being first a force to the regional stability and a contributor to regional stability and prosperity. So that comes with a certain approach to reinforcing and enhancing defense and security capability, to enhancing and reinforcing our foreign policy on the basis of peace and on the basis of solid relations. And my primary focus is on unlocking growth. Unlocking growth means creating jobs, not just for Tunisians, but for youth in Africa and in the region. And so to unlock growth, there are key areas which are what we call the binding constraints to growth. The binding constraints to the economic growth in Tunisia are transportation, so the transportation sector, water, energy, and few other elements. And so one of the key elements that Tunisia could work on and lead on is definitely the unlocking of Tunisia being a platform for global transit. And so one of my goals, which I started when I was in Tunisair, but now, when I get elected, so nobody's going to fire me because I was put in there by the people and I have a 5-year mandate, but is to actually create and can deliver on that project to create a transit hub, international hub in Tunisia. Because now we know the Amsterdam hub, the Paris, the Istanbul, they're all saturated. And so it would really serve, and Tunisia is well located for that particular element. And we have actually estimated that we could create both a cargo hub and a passenger hub and reach about 30 million passengers a year with our current infrastructure, with some investment. So that's one of the key areas of opportunities. Another great area of opportunity for Tunisian investment is investment in water infrastructure and agriculture, actually. Tunisia has one of the highest land per capita ratio in the world. It's a country with a lot of public land, which has a huge potential for agricultural and farming, of course, development. Food security is one of the leading issues all over the world. And so there is not enough investment in food production in the world. And Tunisia could be the sector, the environment and the country for such investment. The other leading sector, which is an area of great investment, would be trade. Tunisia's location actually comes with one of the largest coasts in North Africa. It sits exactly in the middle of the Mediterranean. It was, the reason Carthage was successful before, it's because, Carthage was a trade power, right? And so one of the things I'm working on is to unlock economic freedom and trade freedom. And so and create Tunisia with our ports, deep water ports, expand those, invest more in port infrastructure and storage and so on, but for Tunisia to become a trade gateway to Africa. Actually, the shortest inland path to Central Africa has to go through Tunisia. So
through Tunisia, indeed.
And so the overall...
I take it that you support the electricity bridge from Tunisia to Italy.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, Tunisia and Italy, they're natural partners, right? And so, and for Tunisia, honestly, it's one of our key strategic objectives is to become an important part of Europe's own security in terms of energy, electricity, energy, but also other food and so on, right? Also, because of Tunisia's population, which is highly educated and highly trained compared to others in the region, so investment into sectors like healthcare or education is actually really with one of the highest ROIs. And so investing in universities in Tunisia, into well, actually we have a plan to create of the country uh, a country where healthcare services, which would be of course of cheaper, lower cost to Europeans and to Americans and to others in Tunisia, mix in basically tourism and those services, and so create and expand in the service industry through education and healthcare. Um, these are some of the key things. And so what I tell Tunisians, if you look at our economy right now, the reason it's been a resilient economy is because it's not relying on one sector or the other. We have a balanced approach, a little bit of tourism, agriculture, services, phosphates, and so on and so on. And so I tell Tunisians our objective is to do much better what we already do and integrate into the 21st century tools and join the 21st century by basically unlocking private entrepreneurship and enterprise, free market policies, not just for Tunisians, but also for foreigners, and reducing the role of the state and the communist, the father state approach, right? We want to reduce that and create a safe space for our democracy and institutionalize it in a way where the political crisis no longer comes in front of the economic opportunity of Tunisians. And so the vision is Tunisia, the safe harbor of North Africa, that is an inclusive and sustainable democracy. And so where it's a win-win for both Tunisians, but also for our partners, the regional partners, and actually anybody that wants to, maybe
That
let
that,
go, let
that
go.
wants to participate in the souk of opportunities that you're going to have there.
Exactly, because one of my one of the party members, he's a trader, and he has this idea, and he says he's working on it. He says, well, once you get elected and you can reduce the barriers and the permits and so on, we want to create one of the largest souks in Africa, in Tunisia. So
The central market.
the central market of the Mediterranean. You come and you bargain. So
Well, I think Tunis once was such a place.
it was exactly, yes, it was. It indeed, indeed, indeed.
Great.
Politics when it gets, I think I'm one of those people who I don't want to trash the past too much. I basically say let's own our past with its assets and liabilities. All right, I'm not gonna blame I'm not gonna blame Saeed for where we're gonna be. I'm gonna say, well, whatever you did, just we're done. Okay, give to us our country back. Enough damage. All right.
We tried that. Let's move on.
Let's move on. All right. We're not going to spend a lot of time looking backwards. We're going to look what we have right now and where we want to go. And I basically tell them, if you want to vote for the past, vote for him. If you want to vote for the future, vote for me.
And on that note, which is, I would say, very persuasive, I want to thank you for spending an hour of your valuable time with me and educating me into the peculiarities, because there is a lot of talk in Europe about Tunisia's backsliding. Some people think that Tunisia is already gone, and that's not what I see. And I'm rather happy that your vision is even more optimistic than mine. I may join you there because you've made a few very valid points as to the nature of Tunisians, and they have demonstrated it time and again. So, with that, let me remind people to please go to the Gold Institute's website, where you can find a donate button. There it is. It's a very easy website, www.goldease.org. And please contribute your tax-deductible amount to the extent permitted by law. You know, lawyers wouldn't like it if I didn't say that. And help us bring the world to you 1 hour at a time. And Olfa, I hope I can talk to you again before the elections. You mentioned at the beginning that you might actually be in Tunis rather than campaign from afar.
Of course, campaigning in Tunis.
I hope that comes to be. It would be quite a victory in itself, for what I understand. And the best of luck. I think that Tunisia could do a lot worse than you, frankly, and it has on occasion. But you sound like a very intelligent, very committed, and very capable woman, and maybe that's what's needed.
So thank you so much for the opportunity, and not just the questions, but your own input and your own, I would say, I would even characterize it as love for Tunisia because of the care in your tone and in your words about the country and the time you spent there. So I think you had some pretty good memories there.
I miss it, and I wish that one day we can all go back there and experience Tunisian hospitality. It is a great people, it is a great place, and it belongs with civilized nations.
It belongs to the free world, and I hope to see you there. I hope to welcome you there. And a small note about what you said: when people try to actually dismiss the democracy and the whole Arab Spring thing, to basically say, no, it didn't work out. It was just a moment in history. We all had high hopes, but hey, it turned ugly. I'd like actually to share with people and say, look, the populations that like Tunisians have never gone backwards on anything. Each time they actually make progress, they don't go backwards. Democratic transitions in Switzerland took about 200 years, and Europe itself took, decades and decades for the democratic transition. If in Tunisia, by the end of this year, we have our third transparent presidential election with integrity, and we deliver on the agenda that we have internally to sort out the political crisis, national reconciliation, which I'm really hopeful for, and the national dialogue, what we've done and which already succeeded. Honestly, I would not be here talking to you had the national dialogue not succeeded, actually. So I would say Tunisia would maybe become a world record in a country which has got its democratic transition under one generation. All right, and so I'm a product of that. I think everything that the West invested in Tunisia in the past decade and a half was not lost. I know these were public taxpayer money that were put into supporting democracy, supporting many things. These were investment in people, and look at me. I'm one of millions, right?
Hmm.
And as you said it nicely, Tunisia belongs to the free world. But when I would say in 2011 it was a baby born in the free world. Then it had to grow up and went through teenagehood, and at some point it's becoming an adult, right? And it's going to have a seat on the table of free world countries. And I think we're going to get there. We're going to get there. And so and I believe Tunisia and the Tunisian people will play an inspiring role to other nations as well. And especially the way Tunisians do it, it's always with peace. It's non-violent transition, non-violent political progress. And I think that is one of the biggest. It's the transition with the lowest cost. And I've heard some people say, well, for Tunisians to get their fair, transparent presidential election this year, they need to get out in the street again and do another revolution and another uprising against Said. I think that's one of the most unfair and disrespectful statements I've ever heard. Because when Tunisians went out in the street in 2011, it was because they can tell the dictator, get out, we're done, right? Since then, we had 2 transparent, fair presidential elections, 2 successful ones, including the one that got Said elected. So as free people who have done that and who have paid their dues actually to be part of the free world, why is it that they have now, as they're struggling with food security, with inflation, with drought, with climate change, you also want them to go out in the streets and protest against the very same president they elected 5 years ago, when it's an asset that they already acquired to have a presidential election. And so I'm like, well,
the funny thing is that the people who are telling this to Tunisians are the ones that have an election, elect a president or a prime minister, and 2 weeks later they have 1 million people on the street asking for the resignation, because obviously they seem to have a problem accepting the results.
So
maybe they should follow their own advice too every now and then.
Yeah, so I'm basically saying it's like, it's really, first, when people go out in the street, revolutions cost lives and cost property and cost money. Who wants that? And what is it that we're really asking for? For me, like a candidate right now, all I'm asking for is for the election to happen exactly as in 2019. Nothing more, nothing less. We're not asking for money. We're not asking for anything. We have it all figured out. Observers, volunteers, candidates. We have the energy. We have done everything on our side. All we're saying is that, please, the narrative, especially from free countries, I know really important people and people who follow this space, watch your show, it's really unworthy of free countries to actually put this kind of conditionality of get out to the streets so that we can recognize you're free again. It doesn't make any sense.
No.
An election is an election. We had 2 successful ones. We're going to have a 3rd one. It's our right. And Western countries should stand with that transparent, fair presidential election happening exactly as in 2019 and in 2014. And it's something that I believe in. I guarantee Tunisians are going to come out to the ballot box and they're going to send one of the most strongest messages the region has known in the next election.
Here's to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Saul.
Thank you so much. And may we celebrate together when it happens.
Well, you're coming to the inauguration ceremony. Look, I'm giving myself some luck here.
Oh, boy.
All right. See you in Tunisia.
With pleasure.
Right.
Thank you so much. And you have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.